Once data is in Marketo, there's no need to re-import data just to get a list to use for your campaigns. Smart lists are filters or views which are used to segment the Marketo database. So for example, from this Marketo database, if we wanted to create a smart list A, which selects everyone in New Zealand. So everyone with a country NZ will be in the smart list A. We could then create another smart list B, which is everyone with a gmail.com email. So everyone whose email address has gmail.com at the end of it. So as you can see, these are working off the same data, but they're different views and they do overlap. For example, Bob is in smart list B and Bob is also in smart list A. I'm going to teach you how to do 3 types of segmentation in Marketo: demographic, preference, and behavioral. Using smart lists, we'll show examples of how you can do this with the data you have loaded in Marketo. Let's start with a simple demographic smart list. So you need to be in the lead database tab, go to smart lists, right click and create a new smart list. Let's call it demographic and then add our name. Okay, so now here's the smart list workspace, and on the right we have all the filters. So the first kind of filters you can use in terms of demographics is just all the lead fields in Marketo. So for example, we could use country. It'll give us the 3 fields that match. So in this case we're using country and we're going to select Australia. To see how many leads qualify, we flip to leads and it will give us a live list. So there's 61. Now it's important to understand these are live filters. So for example, if my data was changing in real time between the time I switched from smart list to leads, this could be 62 or 60. It will run at the time that the campaign runs and gets all the data that matches that filter at the time that it's run. So that's important. It's not a static list. That's why we call it a smart list. It's dynamic. So let's go back to smart list. If we wanted to add, for example, Australia and New Zealand, we could click this plus button and then we could add New Zealand. We can also type over here to see what other values we've got. So if you hit the drop down, we could also add AU and Z and then click OK. So that'll give us everyone with a country that matches one of these. So if we flip to leads, that should match with most of our leads, 100 leads. Perfect. Let's now refine that down to particular postcodes. So if we search for postal code, we've got this one here, and what we might do is we want postal codes that start with 2, and then we might click the plus button and actually have 2 and 3 and 4. So everyone with postcodes that start with one of those numbers. So now we've got everyone in those countries plus this postal code. So that should refine down our number of leads. There we go. So now we've got 93. So essentially, to create your smart list and to create the customer segment that you want to target for your campaign, you'll add and remove these kind of filters until you get the right leads and the right amount of leads too. So sometimes you'll refine it too small and you may need to get a bit more generic to actually have enough leads to launch a campaign. Let's create a more sophisticated demographic filter. So what we want here is everyone in metropolitan city in a particular country with a certain age range. So let's start with Australia. So we want everyone country of Australia, and then we'll refine that down to a postal code that begins with a 2 for metropolitan Sydney, and then we might filter down on the date of birth, since we don't have age. So we want a date of birth that is before, so you pick any date here and then modify it. And we want people around 35, so before 1979. Let's say we also want New Zealand, but with a different postal code, as well as a different date of birth, but in the same list. So what we would do is we would build it up in the same way. So we would search for a country, we would select New Zealand, select the postal code, which will most likely be different from metropolitan, say Auckland. So we might say it starts with a 4. And then for the date of birth, perhaps we need to select people that are slightly younger for Auckland because of its demographics. So we'll say the date of birth is before 1984. Now, if we just have it as this, no one will match this criteria because you can't simultaneously be in Australia and New Zealand. So right now, these filters are all filters, so everything has to match here, but that's not what we want. We could use any filter, but then the problem with that is that we are getting everyone in Australia, everyone in any country with a postcode of 2, anyone with a date of birth regardless of country or postcode. So that's not what we want either. What we do want is using advanced filters. So essentially what we want is we want the first 3, so Australia, postcode starts with 2, and then over 35, and they go together. And then what we want is the next three, so 4 and 5 and 6. So that's everyone in New Zealand with a postcode starts with 4 and over a certain age. And then we want an OR between those. So now we're going to get the two sets of people combined. So everyone in Australian metropolitan over 35, and then everyone in New Zealand with metropolitan Auckland over a certain age. So that's how you use advanced filters to create segmentations. Now, it's not the only way to do it. I could split each of these in separate segments and then create another segment which includes both of them. So that's another way to do that.